All right, dear friends, I'm glad to see you all on Saturday, June 4th, 9 p.m., day 101, with Olexiy Arestovych, as usual. I request everyone who joined us to share the links to this cast. There are about 70,000 watching us live, so it does depend upon you how many people will come to watch our stream live today. Hello, everybody. Mark, Konstantin, and the viewers. Okay, what news do you think we should look at? And I have a ton of questions to you because Kremlin keeps giving us interesting excuses to ask these questions. Do we need the map? Yes, let's turn the map. The area that shows Severodonetsk and Slavyansk. Popasna, Severodonetsk. Okay, here is the map. I do not see that, so I'll be playing chess blind. It should have been showed on your screen. Oh, I don't see it. I see you on my screen. I'll try to turn it on my cell phone. So going from the northern borders, they're continuing to use artillery and aviation on the villages in Sumy and Chernigov regions. They demonstrate some pressure along the border with the same goal that we do not move our troops from there to any other location. Let's go towards Kharkiv. There's some basic exchange of artillery hits. Our forces and their forces are moving around very gently, and there are artillery duels happening. And on Izum Slavyansk and Liman Slavyansk directions, there are more things happening. What is interesting, previous days there was a group that's based near Izum was pushing towards Slavyansk, and now there is the one from Liman that is pushing towards it. So Izum is on the northwest and Liman is on the northeast. So now they're pushing from the northeast. And they were shelling and doing some artillery hits, and they were doing it so remarkably that they managed to hit one of the old cathedrals. It's a wooden cathedral, one of the UNESCO protected buildings from couple centuries ago, actually more than several centuries ago. And these protectors of Christian faith just destroyed one of the relics. And they want to get to closer to Slavyansk, but they don't have much access. And Liman Group is splitting their effort. One is going to Popasna, to Ozerna, and another split and trying to go to Slavyansk, trying to cross the water barriers. And the Izum group in the meantime is regrouping. They're trying to figure out the weak spots if we have any. So they work as blinkers. One is blinking, the other isn't. One turned on, the other turned off. So basically it shows that they do have some degree of communication between them. Somebody with a certain level of skill is commanding their work. The idea is the same, to encircle Slavyansk, to cut the road between Slavyansk and Bakhmut, and interrupt the communication lines with leading to our troops, and get to Slavyansk and Kramatorsk and maybe take them. Now let's take Severodonetsk. Street fighting. Optimistic data says 50-50. More pessimistic says we have 30%, they have 50%. The rest is being fought over. They keep throwing more people in. Yet we're already fighting in the downtown, so we push them halfway back. Today there was another missile hit with .U, Bakhmut, Kramatorsk, Lysychansk, Slavyansk. Also they had some of the military helicopters attacking our positions near Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. They were hitting Ustinovka, Peace Valley, and they also attacked positions near Teres, and they were shelling Nikolskaya, Krasnogorivka, Veselaya, and also on Zaporozh, on New Pavlovsk near Gulyai-Polya, their reactive artillery, Russian version of MLRS, hit our positions. So it's nuanced details, but what you need to understand, if they're using aviation to hit the front, and if there are .U missiles hitting our positions, it means that they cannot advance, they stopped, they realized that they cannot continue, and the towns they hit are the centers, the logistic centers through which the restocking of our troops is happening. This is essentially a confirmation of our enemies that they cannot break through our positions. They have the certain positions that they occupied, and they cannot proceed, they cannot continue forward. And they're trying to change the dynamics of this, because right now they are stopped. Everywhere except Severodonetsk, where they are still trying to storm the city, and that direction to Svetlogorsk from Liman, where they're trying to advance. They didn't really move much. And by the way, the fourth monk died in that Svetogorskaya Lavra, that monastery that they shelled. So there are 4 victims. Big defenders of Orthodox Christianity destroyed more Orthodox Christianity relics. They also shelled some of the further cities, and they shot at Odessa, and most of them were shot down. When we analyzed what they used, they were using X-59, which is basically a medium-range aviation missile, which causes a question. They're either testing these missiles, what's the reason for testing something that was manufactured in 1979? Or they're running out of the other class of munition, the long-range missiles. So this mid-range, they pose certain threat because they need to come real close to the front line to use them. So what it appears to be, they're not running out, but they're probably saving or going into the economy mode on the other class of missiles. Also in Kharkov, one of the missiles that hit through, that passed our defenses, hit one of the museums, Sergei Yesenin Museum, a famous Russian poet of the early 20th century. So the saviors of Russian culture destroyed the museum of Sergei Yesenin, and rescuers of Orthodox Christianity destroyed another Orthodox cathedral. That's how they're fighting here. In Kherson, we're still holding our base. Russian side, where we crossed and encamped a little, and Russian side is trying to push us out, but there's no changes so far. All right, then, according to the messages distributed publicly, HIMARS and MLRS systems are already in Europe, and there is a training going on. Ukrainian troops are getting some training on these machines. Do I understand it correct, that this is coming? Yes. It's a matter of weeks, 2-3 weeks, as I used to say. But so far, they're not on the front yet, right? Oh, if they were, you would have seen them. And Moscow's side would start screaming with a very loud scream that HIMARS are destroying their positions. It's, difficult for Ukraine to hide things, for real, although we do manage to make some surprises for Russian troops. But HIMARS, you'd see them once they're deployed. Why am I asking today? Because Putin commented on MLRS systems, and they're going to show that interview on Sunday on Russia 1 channel. He's saying they're cracking them or cracking American reinforcements as peanuts. Somebody probably used that near him. He's not too literally gifted, so he heard that and he used that phrase, I think. He's got probably those peanuts in his head for the brain, so he keeps cracking the peanuts. What did he mean? What could he mean when HIMARS are not on the territory of Ukraine? What can he be cracking? Mark, what can he be cracking? Probably wouldn't count NLAWs. Maybe somebody reported that they destroyed M777 or one of the guns that were destroyed, that arrived by Lend-Lease. Were they destroyed? Perhaps a couple of them could be destroyed. It's war, But regarding that, cracking these peanuts, I think the whole war will be complete by cracking the last two nuts of the main figurant of that war. I heard he only has one. Well, then we'll flick or crack one nut, and that'll put an end to that. Otherwise, I don't know what else he's flicking in his Kremlin. Another information came out from Kremlin that they likely have changed General Dvornikov, and there is another general replacing him, Gennady Zhitkov, with the Ukrainian last name. It's an old story. Half of Russian generals have Ukrainian last names. He was the general in the Eastern District, and he was the general in charge of the political work, information work. We're checking this information. Before that, he was commanding near Izum, and what it means whenever they put the guy in charge of political education, in charge of the army, it could mean, doesn't necessarily mean, but could mean that there is an issue with morale in the troops. What they used to call in the Soviet army political morale component. Basically, they need somebody who needs to not just manage troops, but also inspire troops, find a way to reach soldiers and inspire them to do things. By the way, on Kherson, they tried twice during the last 24 hours, and there was no success, and they actually got really desperate, according to our intercepts, that they're complaining on all levels of military, that lower ranks want to go home, upper ranks are saying we cannot hold them or cannot make them attack anymore. They're tired. Both sides are tired. It's been 100 days, 101 days. It's difficult to do a whole full-scale continental warfare. Nobody promised that to be easy. But if they do need specialists in politics, in morale and politics, it means that they need somebody more skilled than the usual commanders in getting the troops to attack and to try to fulfill the orders. I don't know how much of a master he is, but probably he's been to a few trainings, to a few war games on his level. But another benefit of his appointment is that he probably can use the whole mechanism, the whole machine of political morale system and Russian troops. He can use them to throw at detachments to try to affect the morale of soldiers. And of course you need to explain something to your soldiers when it's day 100 of an operation that was supposed to last for a week, and on the best advanced regions they managed to push for 25 miles, and on most maybe 0 or 1. So it probably does beg some explanation. By the way, so here's the picture of that general, Zhitko, Gennady Zhitko. He's got a star of a hero, a small set of awards Why do you think Dvornikov would be taken down? For a certain mistake or general lack of success? Or was he somebody's protege and they're changing the tactics? Let's follow the easiest way. Is this operation successful? No, it isn't. 44 days, 25 kilometers, with all the concentration of efforts on that front, with all the means and ratio of Russian troops versus Ukrainian, they still failed to achieve any serious goals. The only pluses are maybe taking Izium and taking Popasna, and probably it did cost them about 7,000 troops. And they still have not managed to cross the road, to cut the road Bakhmut-Lysychansk, to not approach Lysychansk, not take Severodonetsk. This is not the effect that Putin was expecting, most likely. So there is another attempt to do some cadre rotation. So you think Dvornikov was removed for lack of ability? Probably. By the way, if you look at Zhitko, he's pretty awarded guy. He went all the way from the bottom. He was different commanding positions, was the head of the Second Army. On the War Games West 17, there was the first attempt of Putin's troops to be left to occupy Belarus. That was cancelled. He managed to move things on long distance effectively. He was vice head of Russian operations in Syria and was renowned for non-standard thinking. So he's probably a guy who knows a bit about commanding. By the way, do you know that, remember when I said somebody was very professional because Russian troops were withdrawing from near Kiev very professionally? At least they started professionally, and at the end they toppled, but the beginning was good. So we know somebody was coming from the east to manage that operation, perhaps some of his trainees that were there. Another thing I want to notice here is the Ukrainian last name. So an interesting note for our viewers. The moment they had some of the Russian troops from the eastern district, we could tell that they were a little more successful in achieving their goals, more cunning battle actions, more interesting motions on the front. One can say that perhaps there are more Ukrainians in the commanding officers from the eastern district, because that's what it's famous, it's well known for in Russia. So perhaps, a bit of Ukrainian blood showing itself. That's a good question. So now, 100 days later, what's your opinion on not just some of the ex-Ukrainians fighting on the Russian side from Crimea, but also ethnic Ukrainians, because there are a ton of Ukrainian last names in the Russian army? That was one of the principles, decisions in Russia, because they were trying to pick the ones who had Ukrainian roots. It is a factor that if they know the location, if they know the mentality of the enemy, and of course they do have access to psychological portraits of their commanders, so they know who would fit where. And if anything, they do have, very likely they have other relations with Ukrainian commanders, and they could, if necessary, negotiate things on the fly in the battlefield, because very likely they'll be facing some of the people they know on the commanding level. But in terms of Ukrainian skills and flexibility, it doesn't really show that well in Russian army, because Russian army is very straightforward. It's like a big machine, and they don't one should, at the same time, one should not hope that they have any sentiments to their small motherland or relatives or far ancestors in Ukraine, because we've seen a lot of situations where their pilots with Ukrainian background were bombing hospitals and other targets in Ukraine, being pilots for Russia. So no sentiment. They're fighting for their war machine, for their regime. Do you think also the other things that happen in Russia, once in a while they capture somebody with Ukrainian background and they very loudly announce that there is a case that this person was leaking data to Ukraine? Do you think they're afraid of any or have any issues with people on the Ukrainian side, with Ukrainian roots helping Ukraine? It is an issue, somewhat. There are a lot of people helping us, and by the way, it's an old formula: money, ideas, compromising material, other concepts. But it doesn't really matter here if it is Russian last name or Ukrainian last name of these people who are helping us. People with Russian last names are helping us very successfully, and they do help us a lot in many matters. So national sentiment in this case, I don't think plays that much of a role. I think there are other factors playing here most. We're just trying to understand if that is a factor. I'm not arguing. Perhaps it has some... Of course, there's always the ideological preparation work that they do on the Russian side to their troops. But there's usually some sentiment with, some people still cherish and they don't want to fight with their relatives or remote relatives. Although personally I would say very often it's much more convenient when you can use money. Do you think some of the generals actually studied in Ukraine? Some of the Russian generals? Oh yeah, absolutely. Basically till 93 we had students who studied and graduated from Ukraine military institutions. So now there would be colonels and lieutenant colonels in Russian army, and from the higher level generals, there is a ton of them who graduated in the Ukrainian institutes. Ukraine had probably most per capita educational establishments, military educational establishments in the Soviet Union. And that's true. Soviet Union was preparing officers in the European side, not so much in the Eastern side. And in Russia, every second officer had some Ukrainian roots. One can find it if dig through the archives. So is there any data that you can pull on the Ukrainian side? Well, yeah, of course, you can request materials on those who graduated and their current position, and their classmates know each other. Military know each other real well. There is a saying that if two military officers in 5 minutes have not found common friends, then one of them is a spy. Even back from the training days, they know each other. They know who is worth what, who can do what, and what is the likelihood of his command style going one way or another. So everybody knows everybody. It's probably harder to find a more tightly knit community than military officers. Everybody knows their strong and weak points. All right. So over about 24 minutes, we're live. 275,000 people watching us. Those who are joining, doing it slow. Yet still, please share the links. Subscribe to Feygin Live, to Olexiy Arestovych, and if you're watching that in English, subscribe to the Privateer station. Mark is especially asking to subscribe to Mark's channel. He's only lacking 15,000 subscribers to hit 1.5 million. And each of our channels has extra interviews, not just our daily chronicles. All right, let's go further to the next subject. Medvedev, in the context of the sixth sanctions package. He became heard again. He probably couldn't stay quiet. came out, and I think somebody wrote that speech for him. He doesn't know much about the criminal code, but he was using some of the articles from it, and I'm trying to make it simple here. Or actually make it sound better, because in his speech it did sound real dumb. The main message was, how can you spread the sanctions on the relatives who are not responsible for what we're doing? And now we got information that his son Ilya, owns a network of gas stations in America, and now he's being asked to leave politely. And we heard before about Peskov's kids that got under European sanctions, Putin's daughters, Kabaeva, and others. He was talking about all of them, but as we see, he's really concerned about his son, who doesn't really like to live on his Russian motherland and probably just despises it. So he lives in those real bad United States with LGBT, BLM, and all the other things he's suffering living there. Sarcasm. So he's saying that kids are not responsible for the decisions of their fathers. They have their own lives. What do you think? Because we did see that some of these sanctions were going somewhat slow. Now that the sixth package is done, and Poland said they're preparing the seventh set of sanctions, what do you think we can see in the seventh, besides the gas embargo, which is a difficult thing to pull through, but what else can be leverage, besides that children are responsible for their parents? It's pretty simple. The safety and prosperity of Putin's regime is based on the monetary income from energy sources. Sixth package closes that matter in terms of oil products. Seventh could possibly address natural gas, although natural gas is a difficult thing to close, because a few years ago Germans, remember, said that they're going to be very ecologically clean, and they closed a bunch of nuclear stations and started to heavily rely on the Russian natural gas. So that dependency became stronger, and it'll be harder to jump off that needle. But they did say that the seventh set of sanctions will be talking about getting off the gas needle, and it might take longer, and not be easy. But that's one of the goals of this set, because as long as Putin's regime has super income, there are ways for him to circumvent the other sanctions. One way or another, he'd find ways to restock certain equipment for his military and maintain some level of socio-economic parameters in Russia. So the lack of the embargo for the gas is still sensitive, because, as we said in Ukraine, you need a trident to hit them. Collective pressure of the world, stop the armaments, and use the sanctions. So in the United States, there is an interesting ministry called the Ministry of Finance, which is essentially a set of professionals who are world-level professionals in tracking who benefits from monetary transactions, the actual beneficiary of the operation. And very often they succeed in finding those interesting relatives of Russian officials who are used to circumvent sanctions or to continue to enrich their relatives. So I don't remember details, but I remember that Lavrov's relative, through his somebody related to his daughter or some close circle, had to actually purchased a small net chain of supermarkets, and then was trying to sell them, do a hot fire sale of those right after the beginning of this war. So they're going and tracking all these financial connections. And Russian side is demonstrating, maybe they understand it well, but they're trying to demonstrate that they don't. And the thing is that in the United States, they're trying to find the last beneficiary of that transaction. And if it's Medvedev or if it's anybody in the Putin's close circle, then the sanctions go against the person related who is part of that financial chain. And then they can scream and shout that, oh, that person is too far, he's not, he's working, he's living his own life, has his own money. But America is usually slow getting to that, but usually they do it whenever they find the proof enough and solid enough materials to back up these sanctions. So you think that initiative of 3 American senators about implementing Navalny's list, those 6,000 names, Marco Rubio, Vicker, I met Vicker before, he's a fun man. He actually gave me an interesting present. So these three are calling for these sanctions. I think if Ukrainian government also asked for this, that would be pushed much faster. I think we did. It just we do not have that much effect. Are there any problems with this? No. I just think that there's a basic checklist that American side is going through. Well, if they go through it and they maybe leave 5,000 out of 6, that's not an issue. Yeah, I think it's just what's happening. It's routine checking. It takes time, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. So after a while, we'll get to them. Maybe not to the whole 6,000, but 5 and 4, but it will get them. The most effective things against Putin's regime are personal sanctions. They are usually it causes very painful reactions on their side when they're getting hurt personally. Oh, they do. We hear a lot of information from the inner circle. There is a lot of screaming and hustling going inside because they feel the money and resources being cut off. So it'll be interesting if they manage to get more people with a wider net. That heartburn will start bubbling in Moscow's body. We'll see that with the naked eye. It'll be visible in different spheres. Another interesting thing, CNN published that USA and some allies are discussing the steps to cease fire in Ukraine. And apparently they're looking at the offer made by Italy, and the United States is reportedly against the Italian plan. And some people are saying that they're discussing some things without Ukraine, other steps with Ukraine, but it appears that Mario Draghi's Italian plan is still somewhat alive, even though it was fully, wholeheartedly rejected by Kiev, not once. That damn plan is still alive. Plus Macron, you probably heard that he said that Putin's error should not become a reason for getting Russia into a very uncomfortable place. And then the Ukrainian minister responded that it actually brings France down, not Russia, such a statement. But just the rhetoric that they are talking about it, that they can try to force Kiev to partake in these negotiations if they cut off the military help. What do you think if they can take a position that we're not giving any arms unless you go talk to Moscow? What do you think? I'm looking at that with a smile, because we immediately are ready to say our position that we cannot do that in front of the people who gave us Bucha and killed so many of our citizens. And we'll be loud about it. Imagine what will happen to the politicians who would say that they're supporting people who did those atrocities in Bucha. Imagine what will happen to their political career. But what if there'll be not enough support from the West? Can you still resist? Of course we can, it'll just not be that successful or that effective. We might roll back slowly to new positions and likely we'll end up in a similar situation that we had the war on Svetladar Duga from 15th to the 20th for those 5 or 7 years. That was just slowly brooding. And I think many of them are relying on some of the analytical centers, saying that their front is slowing down, that they can retreat a bit from Severodonetsk and Izium, but after that this front will freeze. And after that what happens? The war becomes a very lengthy war, and it starts to affect the income and life standards of Europe and Americans. Maybe it's worth striking peace accord with Russia. And I'll say that refrain will be forever, because that shock that ensured after the first 50 days of war, or during the first 50 days of war, when there were almost no negotiations with Russia. Usually there are negotiations. Like in this time, they actually they tried to start negotiating with us 24 hours after the first attack. So negotiations is something you should not be afraid. They will keep going, there will always be peace initiatives, other activities, consulting, actions, official and unofficial, accidental meetings in the hotels, different helpers coming across the border to different politicians. And only some people who watch the war movies think that there is never a compromise and two sides are fighting using 100% of their power. But I want to cite you Clausewitz and also relate that to my personal experience. And I've seen quite a bit during my 30 years of service, or being in the system of national security. So Clausewitz said that an ideal war is something like ideal gas in physics. It never exists. There are never ideal wars. Even when the fight is going for their survival, nations seldom ever participate 100%. For example, American forces were used maybe at 65% during the Second World War. Soviet army and Soviet Union used maybe 85%. Because part of it was still in Siberia, standing on the eastern borders, and there are other limitations, more people in gulags. So military action is never 100% engagement of all the resources. It's not just because of the wish to follow certain rules of war, but it's because war is a much more complex thing than battle actions on the front. Of course, it includes economy, information operations, special services, creating different unions and alliances. And since European diplomacy is standing on a balanced principle since 17th century, then one of their concerns is, would one side become too strong as a result of this war? What if Ukraine and Poland become too strong? And what if another country becomes too weak? So they're trying to maintain a certain balance. So they're getting together, consulting. I'll open one mystery not many people know. Back in, I think in 1965, there was an Institute of the Problems of World Politics, which had 2 floors of European specialists, American specialists, and 2 floors of Soviet specialists in it. It was the heat of the Cold War. It was just when Soviet Union started celebrating the Victory Day. Oh yeah, no, Stalin did not like the Victory Day parades. He never celebrated it. You know, and that was during the Cold War. And then Second World War, negotiations started almost immediately. In 1940, they already were negotiating between Germany and England. I had a chance to talk to some Ukrainian resistance during the Second World War who were fighting during that time. That the guys were telling me there were negotiations between Germany and USSR, and Soviet Union was actually offering Germany to give them the whole Ukraine and some of Belarus to leave USSR intact. It didn't work, but it was interesting that it was Abwehr from German side, there was NKVD from Soviet Union side, and their intermediaries in Ukraine were the own UPA, Ukrainian independent army representatives. And negotiations were going early on. 42nd, 43rd, 44th, those negotiations were going non-stop. And in the background, there was D-Day, landing, and the American army fighting to the last soldier. All the time, there was negotiation process going on. So one should not be afraid of them. It is a natural political background of everything going on. Nobody's going to surrender. Nobody's going to capitulate or stop fighting here. It'll be against our people and our land. And these negotiations are also trying to push, sometimes when they're playing it in the media, they're pressing the button of the people that your government is secretly negotiating with Russia. So, and they will probably deceive all of you and do that behind your back. Actually, Russians have a similar scare, similar fear on their side that there are some agreements going on behind. But I can tell you there will not be any agreement of a Minsk III kind, because any agreement like that, without them getting out of Ukraine, will give them more resources, which they'll use to continue the war in advance. We need them to be destroyed. We need the crush of Putin's political regime. It may take us some time, but, maybe it'll be faster. Something may happen in Kremlin, very reminiscent of Stalin's death. Our goals are clear and perspectives are pretty clear too. Just the way is very tricky. Citing Mao Zedong, from defeat to the full and final victory in the war. So if somebody will be voicing out loud that they will not be giving us weapons, it will be the last political mistake that politician will make. I just want to state my opinion here right now on this. I think we discussed everything, right? It's been long enough. 42 minutes, almost 320,000 people watching us live. If you still have not, please subscribe to our channel, leave your likes, subscribe to the Privateer station, and please leave your like there. Each like makes the video displayable for 10 more possible viewers. Are we meeting tomorrow? No, let's skip one day. I got some stuff, some business to take care of on Sunday. All right, Monday. See you Monday. What time we're doing? Let's do at 10 Kiev time. Let's do next week 10 Kiev time. See what happens. Again, Privateer station will be translating as soon as we can, likely around midnight Eastern time, American Eastern. So tomorrow, day off, enjoy, have fun, have a drink. On Monday at 10 p.m. Kiev time, come to see us here. We'll be glad to meet with you again. Goodbye, everybody.